The top 100 players of 2024 has officially been released by NFL Films and NFL Network. And now it's time to investigate. It's time to analyze. It's time to determine whether the NFL players actually know what they're talking about entering the 2024 NFL season. If you don't know how the top 100 players list actually works, it's based on the previous season, 2023, and the players that are the best in the game right now. And it's voted on by their peers, which is why it matters. Everyone asks, why do people care about the top 100? Because it's voted on by the players. The players talk about each individual player in these awesome video packages with great highlights and insight into each individual player, especially at positions like offensive tackle or defensive tackle, where the casual NFL fan doesn't really have a lot of insight into the best players at those positions. So yes, this list does matter. It matters to the players because they are being acknowledged by their peers as the best of the best. So that's why I take it seriously. But I also want to let you know where they got it right and where they got it wrong. So therefore, this reaction. Gronk, spike the like button for more NFL reactions just like this. Subscribe to the channel for deep, thoughtful insight on the NFL each and every day. And of course, let me know in the comment section below what you think the players got right and what you think the players got wrong. Let me know your thoughts on the list. Let's go, guys. Let's break it down. The top 100. We're going to work from number 100 up to number 1. The top 10 ended up being highly controversial, and if you want a deeper video on the Patrick Mahomes ranking specifically, I already put out a rant video on that topic, so make sure to check that out. But I haven't actually seen this list. I didn't tune into a single episode. I haven't watched the YouTube clips at all, so I really don't know who's even on the list. So this is my first raw reaction to the actual list. So let's rock. At number 100, Zaire Franklin of the Indianapolis Colts. I was not expecting to see him on this list, and I would probably not have him on my top 100. But what I will say is I think he's an underrated linebacker that plays an essential role in that front seven of Gus Bradley's Colts defense. I'm glad to see he got a shout, right? Clearly respected by his peers as a wicked sideline-to-sideline athletic linebacker. Yeah, I'm very surprised to see him at 100 and only one spot back of Lavonte David, who has been on this list for a while, I feel like, or at least he should be on the list every year pretty much. But Lavonte David should be higher, I would say. You know, he's been a top 5-ish linebacker throughout the majority of his NFL career. I definitely feel like he's been higher in previous seasons. And Lavonte David, I would say 99 is a tad bit disrespectful, but at least he's still on the list. You know, sometimes with the way that they vote and things, a lot of the more popular positions, like let's say quarterback, wide receiver, running back, even sometimes like corners, they get maybe a little bit overrated as opposed to linebackers, offensive linemen, things like that are a little less sexy to the eye. But Lavonte David, just a stud. Cam Hayward, glad to see him still on the list at number 98 despite a down season, but clearly one of the most respected players in the NFL. Walter Payton, Man of the Year, I believe, as well. I think he's going to have a bit of a bounce back. I'm not sure how many years he's going to play, if this is going to be his final year or his second to final year, but he's still a very good player when he plays. He was just very injured last year, and I'd expect the Steelers to have, like I've said already, one of the best pass rushes in football, and I think Cam Hayward heavily contributes to that. Terry McLaurin at number 97. He's been very consistent throughout his career in terms of putting up 1,000 yards and doing his thing as the number 1 receiver on a pretty bad offense and a pretty bad team with a bunch of different quarterbacks, right? But honestly, going into 2024, I wouldn't have Terry McLaurin on my list. I don't think that he's a top 20 receiver in football right now, at least based on last year. So based on last year, I wouldn't have Terry McLaurin on my list. Based on a longevity of his career, I think you could definitely make an argument that he belongs on the list. And he's been on the list in past years, for sure. Dion Dawkins, another one that I'm glad to see on the list. I almost feel like he could be higher on the list. I think that he is by far the best offensive lineman on Buffalo. He's probably the most underrated player on Buffalo over this past 4-year run. And yeah, I'm glad to see that he's respected as one of the best. I almost feel like the top 100 at the bottom of the list is usually pretty interesting to look at because it's usually players that are maybe a little bit underrated that just find their way into the list at the bottom, but are actually maybe a little bit better than people actually consider. At number 95, Julian Love. That's an interesting mention. I really like Julian Love. I think he's a really good player. Similar to Franklin, I think they're both underrated players. I'm not sure if I would have him in my top 100, but I do think that he is like a top 20 safety at least. Very versatile, could play in the box, can play deep, can cover man, zone. Very smart, high IQ player, plays with a lot of energy, a lot of fire. I think he's going to have a huge year in 2024 in Mike McDonald's defense. Very much looking forward to that. I like that pick. I probably wouldn't have him on my list, but I like that pick. Trevor Lawrence at 94, I would not have on my list just because I would not include 15 quarterbacks. I think Trevor Lawrence, based on last year, certainly doesn't really belong. But then also, based on moving forward, maybe you could project him onto this list. But I just feel like he's on this list because there's 16 quarterbacks on the list. He's probably the last guy that got mentioned. He obviously is the final quarterback on this list. So, on my list, I'd probably only include 12 quarterbacks, and Trevor Lawrence would probably just be outside that list. Harrison Smith at number 93. I think this is a veteran respect thing. Similar to Cam Hayward, similar to Terry McLaurin, guys that have been good for a very long time. I don't think Harrison Smith is quite as good as he used to be or really nearly as good. I thought last year was just an okay season for his standards. He's still good. Don't get me wrong. He's a good starting safety. I just don't feel like he is a top 10 safety. I probably have Julian Love above him, to be honest, at this point. I do think he's solid. I do think that he's still, of course, great tackler, very smart player. He did have to kind of change in terms of working to a Brian Flores scheme and defense, and maybe that had some effect on his overall statistical production and things like that. But yeah, I probably would not have Harrison Smith at this age on this list. At number 92, Aaron Rodgers, who didn't really play last year, so this is obviously just a respect thing, and I understand that. It's Aaron Rodgers. He's a Hall of Famer. He's coming back this year. He's going to play. So putting him on the list does make sense. I do think it makes sense in the bottom 10 to put him on the list if you're going to put him on the list at all. But based on how he played in 2022, I probably wouldn't even have him on the list just based on how he played that year because he wasn't a top 10 quarterback that season to me, right? They had a losing record in Green Bay. They didn't make the playoffs. He was kind of underwhelming. He didn't make a lot of big time throws down the field. He was highly conservative. He just wasn't the same Aaron Rodgers. He definitely took a step back. So I am intrigued to see, because I've seen quarterback lists where he's in the top 5. I've seen quarterback lists where he's in the top 3. I've seen quarterback lists where he's outside the top 10. I've seen everywhere, right? I've seen him at number 8. There's so many different spots where he is ranked. So he is a highly controversial quarterback ranking right now just because people kind of forget how he played in 2022. They kind of remember the MVP back-to-backs, and they kind of don't really remember 2022. And they kind of just feel like he's going to be back to MVP form. But some people also kind of feel like he's just done and old and washed, which I'm also not in that camp. So it's somewhere in the middle. At number 91, Tariq Woolen, who I would not have on my list. I did not have him in my top 32 defensive backs. Maybe I'm wrong on that mention, but I just didn't think he played that well last year. I thought he was pretty inconsistent. I thought the Seahawks defense overall was pretty inconsistent, and I thought that he was the second best corner on his team. I thought Devin Witherspoon was a better player last year. I also feel like moving forward, he's probably going to bounce back, though. I do think that Mike McDonald's defense is going to get the most out of him playing perimeter corner and like a Marlon Humphrey type of vibe, but he's a good player. He needs to work on his tackling and his consistency and coverage and maybe be a little bit less gamble risk adverse, but I feel like Reek Woolen, he's got the skill and the ability. He's shown that ability. He's shown top 100 ability before. I almost feel like this is a ranking based on how he's played in previous years and not exactly last year, but that's just my opinion. Next up, we've got at number 90, Devontae Smith, who, again, like, is he a top 20 receiver in the NFL? Probably not, right? Like, is he top? You can make an argument, I guess. He's somewhere around that range, right? Like somewhere around like 18 to 25, right? Somewhere in that range for most people. For me, that doesn't belong on a top 100 list. That's just like picking a big named wide receiver who won a Heisman in college, who everybody knows. And like, yeah, he's good and he's in a good offense, but is he a top 100 player in the NFL? He's the second best receiver on his team, pretty clearly. So, again, I probably wouldn't have him on my list. He's a good player, but needs to do a little bit more for me. Budda Baker at 89, that's fine. I thought Budda Baker definitely had a down year last year, but based on, overall seasons, I feel like Budda Baker still is one of the better box safeties in football. He makes some great tackles. He's great around the line of scrimmage. He's very fast at the football. His reaction skills, his read and react skills are off the charts still. And he's like the best player on the Cardinals defense. So I understand that. At number 88, Chris Lindstrom, I think should be higher. If he is arguably the best guard in football, or at least in the top 3, he should be higher than 88. And this is a problem with the top 100 every season. They largely underrate offensive linemen. And I think that's at fault of the players around the NFL of not really voting those guys up the list, right? Chris Lindstrom has been a top 2 or 3 or 4 guard in football the last 3 years. He should be higher on this list. Hassan Reddick at 87, that's fine. He's a sack specialist. Had another 10-plus sack season last year. Probably, I think I respect the ranking around 87 to the lower end of the list. I thought that he fell off a little bit last year in comparison to his epic 2022 production, but still an excellent pass rusher. A little bit underwhelming as a run defender, just given his size and things. I'm really excited to see him in New York, although he's had a kind of a hectic and a weird offseason since coming to that team. Saquon Barkley at 86, that's fine. I think Saquon is a still very good running back. I think he's maybe a little bit overrated, and I've always been a massive Saquon fan. People that have followed this channel for years understand how much I like Saquon, but he kind of like has not been elite the last season specifically. The year before, he was very, very good, I thought, but this past season, there was a lot going on with the Giants, right? Like, play calling wasn't as good. It felt like quarterback position was awful all year, no matter who they played. The offensive line was a disaster. So they've had a lot of issues. I'm really excited to see him in a more competent offense with an offensive scheme that features him, and to have a good, solid quarterback with good pieces around him. It's going to be exciting to see Saquon this year. I think he's going to have a very nice year for the Eagles. So I think he's a top 100 player. I do agree that he's lower on the list, though. At number 85, I think this is a criminal offense to have Tristan Wirfs after getting the contract as well. At number 85, I think he's definitely, without a doubt, a top 50 player in the NFL. He's arguably a top 3 tackle in the NFL, in my opinion. I think there's Trent Williams, there's Penei Sewell, there's Tristan Wirfs, and probably Lane Johnson. That's probably like the short list of the best left and right tackles in the NFL. Wirfs is just a beast. I just think he's so athletic. His footwork are really, really good. His anchor, his strength. I mean, the guy really has it all. He's better as a pass blocker, I think, than a run blocker overall. But, I mean, the guy, like, never gets beat. So, at number 85, I think he's way too low. 84, like, to have DK Metcalf over Tristan Wirfs. Wirfs is, like, a top 5 tackle, like, minimum in the NFL. And DK Metcalf is, like, the 15th best receiver probably in the league, 14th, 13th, somewhere around that range, right? That just doesn't really make sense, in my opinion, right? Receivers, loaded position, obviously, and they're very well known, especially for fantasy football purposes. But yeah, Metcalf's a beast. He's maybe a top 100 player, but Tristan Wirfs is different. Like, he's a different level to me. Derwin James, I think, is overrated. I thought he had a bad season last year overall, like statistically speaking. I think part of the problem, though, is his deployment. Like, I think that a lot of coordinators and schemes don't really know how to deploy him effectively. You know, he plays kind of everywhere, right? He's like a joker, so he'll play free safety. He'll play in the slot. He'll play in the box. He'll play like as a dime linebacker. He'll do a lot of different things, which is almost like his strength of versatility is almost weighing against him. But I thought that his ball production was down. His ability to take the football away was certainly down. I thought that his overall coverage fluidity was down. I think that he is a better player in the box at this point of his career. I think his movement skills are a little bit lesser than they used to be. If he's on the list, which I think is definitely debatable, he's definitely in the bottom 20, in my opinion. Montez Sweat deserves to be on the list. Not really going to say much other than he was extremely valuable to Chicago's defense. He showed his value to Chicago's defense once he appeared. I mean, they just took off as a defense once he appeared on the defense. So I like that. Kirk Cousins, speaking of, do you like that? I don't know if I do. Just he's coming into this season with a torn Achilles. I will say that just simply based on last year, he does deserve to be on the list. I thought he was playing really, really good football last year. He played an amazing game against the 49ers on Monday Night Football. He was putting up borderline MVP, top 3 passing yards, passing touchdown type numbers in football. If you kind of projected over the full course of the season, he was going to rank in the top 5 in every category known to passing stats, right? So Cousins was having an epic season. I just feel like with the whole injury, the change of teams, all that scenery, I think that if he's on the list, he's probably bottom of the top 100, kind of like an Aaron Rodgers vibe. But to me, like based on just last year, yeah, he does deserve to be on the list. At number 80, Sam Laporta. I like that he's on the list as a rookie. Epic tight end season as a rookie, 10 touchdowns, right? Over 80 catches, over 800 yards. Really just fluid athlete, great after the catch, really deceptively good route runner, even as a rookie, and can also block. I mean, just a complete tight end that's going to dominate the league for a number of years. Minkah Fitzpatrick had a down year last year. I think he's better than 79 overall, though. Like, I feel like he's probably a top 50 player in most seasons in the NFL, but last year just wasn't his best season, so I kind of understand. At number 78, Kyren Williams. I'm happy he's on the list. I thought that he was one of the best running backs in football last year, and I think he's going to have just as good, if not a better year in 2024. I think he's really, like, even in fantasy, I think he's a little bit slept on, but he's a 3-down player. He's a good pass catcher, can run routes. He's tough in between the tackles. He's got good, quick feet, very good vision. He is the new lead tailback of Sean McVay's attack. I think he's awesome. I agree that he should be on this list. Trey Hendrickson should be way higher. I think he had like 18 sacks last year or something insane. So yeah, he should be way higher. He's a top 7 edge rusher, no matter how you slice it in the NFL. So yeah, he's like a top 50 player without a doubt in my mind. That is a really bad ranking. At number 76, Dre Greenlaw, who I would agree should be on the list, but I would also say if it's based on entering 2024, you might remove him just because he had a torn Achilles and he might not return to the league until November, October. So that is iffy, right? He tore his Achilles in the Super Bowl, but based on last year, he's a top 10 linebacker in the NFL. So he's definitely top 10. He might even be like top 6 or 7. So I get it. Another one that I get, but like, I also feel like because of the injury thing, he wouldn't be, if I was projecting, he wouldn't be on my list next year. Justin Herbert, definitely on the list. I think that at 75, that's a criminal offense. You should be fined and or put in jail for putting Justin Herbert at 75. He's probably a top 50 player in the NFL. He's a top 7 quarterback in the league, right? No matter, some people have him at 4, some people have him at 5, some people have him at 3, some people have him at 7. But he's pretty much well-renowned and well-regarded as a top 8, top 7 quarterback in the NFL. So that just is way too low. At number 74, Jesse Bates is way too low. Like a stud top 4 safety in the NFL without a doubt. And to me, top 3. I think he's the best free safety in the NFL, period. Jeffrey Simmons, 73. That makes sense. Jeffrey Simmons, really good player. I feel like he deserves to be on the list. one of the more consistent defensive tackles over the last few years. He's had some better seasons than last year. Last year was kind of a little bit of a down year for him, I guess, kind of similar to Minkah Fitzpatrick, but definitely still a player that's in the top 100. Garrett Wilson just, again, appears to be overrated for me. Like, he's a good player, but he has really yet to have, like, an amazing year. He's had 2 really solid years, like over 1,000 yards, a Rookie of the Year season, but nothing overwhelming to the point of being 72 on the top 100. Like, even being above, like, DK Metcalf already kind of feels a little bit foolish. Like, I feel like he needs to have a 1,200, 1,300 yard season. And obviously it's difficult to do that when you have Zach Wilson throwing you the ball, but I still feel like a certain level of production has yet to be met by him to be warranted at this number. At number 71, Laramie Tunsil, I think should be higher. I think he's one of the best pass blockers in the NFL, but I also love that he's on the list. At number 70, we have Amari Cooper, who I think that's a pretty accurate ranking overall. I think Amari Cooper had an excellent season last year. I think he over 1,200 yards. I think he was second in yards per reception. He had a really good season. I think he had one of his best seasons of his career, and he did it with multiple quarterbacks and a run-heavy offense. So, yeah, I love Amari Cooper. I think he had a great season last year. Cooper Kupp, I think, is overrated at 69. Just, didn't have a good year last year, was injury-riddled, wasn't very efficient on a per-play basis. He could definitely bounce back this season. It could happen if he stays healthy, but I'm kind of worried about his injuries kind of piling up on him. So if he's on the list, he's at the bottom of the top 100 in my opinion. Danielle Hunter, again, underrated. He's underrated every year. At number 68, I think he had like 16, 17 sacks or 14 plus sacks again. I think it was like his 5th or 6th time in his career that he's had 14 plus sacks. The guy's just a beast, so you have that number of sacks, plus you have, top 8 in run stops. That's a top 50 player in my opinion. Teron Armstead is good, but I honestly don't know if I'd have him in my top 100. He just doesn't play enough. He gets hurt way too much. So I'd probably not have him in my top 100. Brandon Ayuk, I think probably should be higher. I mean, Brandon Ayuk for me is like a top 6 or 7 receiver in the league. And maybe that's too high for a lot of people. Like, they might have Mike Evans over him or Devontae Adams over him, and that's fine. But I just felt like Brandon Ayuk, probably the most efficient receiver in the NFL last year. Like, you look at the yards and the amount of targets he had, the yards per target, the yards per reception, the yards per route run, like what he does. And then you could pretty much project him inside any offense. It's not just because he's in San Francisco. The guy could play slot, outside. He can run routes really effectively at all 3 levels. He's a dangerous yak threat. He can go up and catch the ball uncontested. He is the best receiver, I think, in San Fran. I think that he is one of the top 6 or 7 or 8 receivers in the league, which on this list should certainly warrant top 50 because of the amount that they put into the wide receiver position. At 65, Jordan Poyer is probably the worst ranking I have seen on the list so far. Jordan Poyer might not be a top 200 player in the NFL. He is completely and utterly washed, in my opinion. He is slow, old. I don't get it. I get it. He used to be really good. He used to be really good in his heyday. He is not that. He might not even start on Miami, like, honestly. So, I don't know. 65 is insane. Patrick Queen, I think 64. He probably should be a little bit lower, as in he should probably be closer to, like, 80. But I think that's a good ranking. Or he should be on the list. Jalen Waddle, 63. That's actually a really good ranking. That's probably pretty close to where I would have him. A dynamic player, one of the best, if not the best, number 2 receiver in the league. Bradley Chubb had a great bounce-back season this year with Miami. He's coming back from an injury, though, so like if you're projecting based on injury, you might not have him on your list or very low on your list. But if you're just looking at last year, he certainly deserves to be in this range. Justin Madubuike, probably based on just last year, is in the top 50, but based on his overall body of work, you probably have him a little bit lower. But I think he had like 12 and a half sacks last year, which led the Ravens, the best defense in the NFL, so that speaks for itself. Up next at number 60, Raheem Mostert, which is just one of those top 100 rankings where you're like, really? Like, I don't know about that. Like, Raheem Mostert for me is not a top 10 running back in the league, and I probably don't even have the top 10 running backs on the top 100. Mostert, I love the guy, don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of his production stems from the scheme. Like, I think in a different offense, like, he's probably not nearly as impactful or effective. Like, his stats were ridiculous last year, but I just feel like he's arguably not even the best running back on his team, and he might even be the backup next year. So, yeah, Bobby Wagner at number 59 is absolutely hilarious, considering that, like, yeah, he shouldn't be on the list, like, at all. Bobby Wagner is still, like, a starting linebacker in the league and, like, a Hall of Famer, one of the best linebackers of all time, but he's not a top 60 player in the NFL. I'm sorry. Christian Wilkins at number 58. This is actually a really good ranking. I think Christian Wilkins is a top 5 or 6 defensive tackle in the league. He's a very well-rounded player, and I think he had his best pass rushing season, if I'm not mistaken, this year. At number 57, Justin Simmons. Even for me that loves Justin Simmons, that feels a little high for a guy that hasn't even been signed to a contract yet. Maybe he's just waiting for more money, but if he's on the list, he's probably like bottom 10. He's still a good player, but he's probably not like an elite safety anymore. Stephon Diggs is way too high. I know this is based on reputation and popularity, and Diggs has been one of the best receivers in the NFL. But last year, like, you just look at the body of work over the last 10 games of his season, and he just wasn't the same player. It was just flat out clear. Like, he wasn't even averaging 10 yards a reception. He had 1 touchdown in, like, 8 games. He did nothing in the playoffs. Like, yeah, Diggs is not a top 60 player. He's probably the 2nd receiver on the Texans, maybe the 3rd. So, to me, like, he's not a top 100 player. Brian Burns probably isn't a top 100 player for me, or if he is, he's really low. I just don't think that his production matches his reputation. Like, his sack numbers are low. His pressure numbers are somewhat low. Like, I really like his game. I think that he has one of the best, like, pass rushing packages, bend ability, all that sort of stuff. Like, when you watch him play, he's very fun. But he also disappears from games, and even from Panthers fans, like, I feel like they felt he was overrated, and they were happy to get rid of him to some degree. Jonathan Allen at 54. I really like that ranking. I didn't think he had his best season last year, but overall, I'm a huge Jonathan Allen fan, so I respect it. At number 53, Zach Martin feels to finally be properly ranked, because, like, in previous years, he should have been ranked way higher, because he was, like, the best guard and arguably the best lineman in the NFL for, like, a few years there. But now he's slowing down a little bit. So, yeah, he's probably not a top 50 player, but he's flirting still. Patrick Surtain at 52. That's probably fine. I'm not, like, the biggest Patrick Surtain fan, and there's probably corners that aren't even on the list that I feel are better than him. So, but it is what it is. I think he's good. Keenan Allen at number 51. Again, I've never been, like, a Keenan Allen guy, a stan. Like, a lot of NFL players really respect Keenan Allen because he is like a receiver's receiver. Like, he's tough. He's got a wicked release package. He's really good, running routes in the short and intermediate levels. He's very good in that range of just piling up stats and numbers. But to me, his impact on football games is not warranted for the 51st spot. Like, he's a volume receiver, and he's not a very impactful weapon, if that makes sense. Like, if Keenan Allen catches 10 passes in a game, you probably still can win the game in a large majority of games. I think a lot of his production is not really having a huge impact on wins and losses. That's just my opinion, but I could be wrong. I do think he's probably top 100 though, based on like his stats last year. They were pretty crazy. He averaged the most receptions per game. So he's definitely in the top 100. He's just, I think, too high. At number 50, Rashawn Gary. That's interesting that he is that high. I like Rashawn Gary. I do think he's probably a little bit too high, though. I think he could have a huge year, though. So based on projection, maybe he gets in that top 50. Based on previous years, he might be in the top 50. But based on last year, I thought it was like a good year, but not like a phenomenal season. At number 49, Derrick Henry still deserves to be in the top 50. I agree with that. At number 48, Jared Goff is too high. I like that the players gave Jared Goff a lot of respect here, but this is where you get to the range where, like, quarterbacks are just becoming, like, way too high on the list. A lot of people are going to push quarterbacks up because they're quarterbacks. To me, like, I don't know, like Jared Goff is a top 100. I would have him in my top 100, but if he's like the 11th best quarterback in the league or whatever, he's probably not in the top 50. I mean, that's just too many quarterbacks in the top 50 players, unless you're basing it off value. Aiden Hutchinson at 47, like in comparison, Aiden Hutchinson is a like awesome player. Like Aiden Hutchinson led the NFL in pressures for the entire year, I think, from front to back, like from the beginning to the end of the postseason. He led the NFL in pressures. He led the NFL in hits. So he's a top 30 player, in my opinion. At number 46, I think Antoine Winfield is also a top 30 player. He is probably the most biggest playmaking safety in football. His forced fumble numbers, his interception numbers, his sack numbers, you put those together, it's just unmatched, right? His production is outrageous, and he's very versatile. He does a lot of different things, and he plays with a great passion and toughness. Jamar Chase, he's too low. I think he's a top 4 or 5 receiver in the league, so I'd have him top 25, probably. Demario Davis, that feels about right at number 44. No complaints there. Kyle Hamilton at number 43. That's also too low. I think he's like the second best defensive back in the league. So I would probably have him in the top 20 or 25. I think that's just one of those rankings in the top 100 where the players are maybe, they realize he's good and they recognize he's good, but I don't think they're willing to crown him yet necessarily. That it takes a little bit of time. And sometimes on these lists, you'll see guys where, like Kyle Hamilton, where people just aren't willing to like rank him high until like the next season. And then maybe he had actually a little bit less of a season, but he just proved it again. So they put him higher on the list. That often happens in this list. Number 42, Matthew Stafford. Sounds about right, although I'd have him maybe a little higher. I think he's a top 6 quarterback in the NFL. And based on, I think, the list itself, he's going to be way too low on this list because, again, like Jared Goff is at 48. Stafford's at 42. Stafford's probably, for me, like four quarterback higher than... I already know, like... So who's above him probably? Like Dak's above him? I don't think that's accurate. Purdy's above him. I don't think anyone would take Purdy over Stafford. I think, who else is above him? Obviously, Allen, Lamar, Mahomes, that's deserved. Stroud's above him, which I think is debatable, although I'd lean towards Stroud. Like, who else is above him? Tua, maybe? I think I saw Tua as above him, so we're going to get to that. Lane Johnson at number 41. That's a good ranking. I think he should be a little bit higher, but that I respect it. He is well respected at this point. I mean, how many years in a row do you have to be the best right tackle in the league to get ranked that high? At number 40, we've got Devontae Adams, which I think feels right. Maybe a little bit lower, to be honest, for me, just based on last year, but he is Devontae Adams at the end of the day. He only really had one kind of down year, and it was bad quarterback play. Joe Burrow should be way higher. He's Joe Burrow. I don't know. I don't understand the disrespect for Joe Burrow. I don't know what I'm missing here, but I don't know. Like, what is it? But he should be higher. Sauce Gardner should certainly be a lot higher than 38. He's probably the best corner in the league. And we'll see if there's any corners ranked higher than him. But he's at 38. At number 37, Quinnen Williams. He should probably be a little bit higher, just off the top of my head, but I don't think that's a bad ranking. Phenomenal player. Back-to-back Jets. At number 36, Tua Tagovailoa might be the worst ranking on the entire list at number 36. He is not a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, and if he is, he's probably 10th on your list. So, like, for me, being 36th, that's just insane. I think there's probably like half the NFL quarterbacks in the league could put up the same amount of numbers in that offense as Tua. That's just me personally. But for him to be ahead of Matthew Stafford is absolutely insane. For him to be ahead of Justin Herbert by 40 spots is absolutely ludicrous. Right? I think there's debate that Cousins, Rodgers, and Lawrence are better than Tua. So anyways, number 35, I like the ranking for Josh Hines Allen. Had a great season last year. Jordan Love at 34 is way too high. I love Jordan Love, but at least he's above Tua. But man, he's like 80 or 90. I mean, he had like half a good year. Let's be fair. Puka Nacua, phenomenal year. Great player. He might be a little too high too, honestly, but he's probably going to have another amazing year. So I totally get it. At number 32, Quincy Williams. Love that ranking. I think he's an elite player at linebacker. I'd have him in my top 50 probably. 32 might be a little high. Deron Bland at 31. That's way too high for me just because, like, I don't know. He screams like ball production guy, but not shut down. I don't know. I think he's top 100 for sure, but 31 seems high. All right. At number 30, Deebo Samuel. Too high in my opinion based on last year. He got injured a little bit, right? His numbers were down a little bit in terms of receiving, but there are games where Deebo is like one of the best players in the NFL, one of the most dynamic weapons in the NFL. There are games, like the Eagles game for, mention, but there's also weeks where he's just not really the same player. Like the Super Bowl, I thought he was very underwhelming. I thought overall in the playoffs, he wasn't super awesome. So at number 30, Deebo, he's still a very good player. You could argue top 50 for the versatility that he offers and all that sort of stuff, but 30th seems high just based on reputation. Khalil Mack, 29. Honestly, based on last year, I get it. 100%. He's just getting old. At number 28, Brock Purdy is too high. Like, let him have another year where he's like really, really good. Then maybe he can catapult himself into the top 7 quarterbacks in the league. I think he's around 10 or 9. Just because, like, again, kind of like Tua. Like, I think a lot of quarterbacks could produce in that system. But obviously, Purdy and Tua uniquely suit those offenses very well. But I feel like a lot of quarterbacks would be propped up in those systems. So to me, at number 28, I think Purdy's a little bit overrated here, but I really like Purdy. I think he's a great guy and a very good quarterback. And I think there's some people that just hate on him way too much. At number 27, Nick Bosa. That actually is a really good ranking. I think that's a really good ranking. I think maybe he's a little bit too low, to be honest. Like, he's probably top 25, but I'm actually kind of surprised he wasn't ranked higher. He was the Defensive Player of the Year in 2022, so maybe I said it's a very good ranking because I think that he actually did have a down year last year, but he's probably top 25. Like, Mike Evans, got a lot of respect for him, and the players do, obviously, for the consistency. I totally understand the ranking. I'm not really going to hate on it. It's just that I think, like, if you're judging it off the whole, NFL, if he's like the 6th or 7th best receiver in the league, is he number 26 overall? Probably not, but I get it. Jalen Ramsey at number 25 is probably too high for me, but he had a good year last year with Miami. I thought he fell off the year previous, but he actually had a resurgence last year. Really, really smart player. Really good player. Dexter Lawrence, definitely top 25, no question. Great ranking. At number 23, Amon-Ra. People love him. Players love him. I get it. I would probably rank him a little lower. Penei Sewell at 22. That feels about right. Maybe a little bit higher, to be honest. He's arguably the best right tackle in football, so he could be argued to be a little bit higher. A.J. Brown at 21, I think, is a very good ranking. That's almost dead on, in my opinion. At number 20, C.J. Stroud. Yeah, I get that. I'm not going to hate on that if he's like the 5th best quarterback in the league. You got Roquan Smith at number 19. Roquan, definitely top 20. I would argue he could be top 15, but he's definitely top 20. Justin Jefferson at 18, I think is too low. I think Justin Jefferson, just because he got hurt last year, but I think he's a top 10 player in the NFL pretty easily. You don't even really have to think about that. He still had over 100 yards per game last year, even when Cousins was hurt in some of those games. Most of those games, I think. So, yeah, Jefferson is top 10. Parsons at 17 is a very good ranking, although having Dak above him is insane. Like, Parsons is clearly a better player than Dak Prescott. Like, it's not even a conversation. It's not even close. Like, Parsons is way better than Dak Prescott. Let's be honest. Okay? CeeDee Lamb, you could argue CeeDee Lamb is better than Parsons on his own team. But Dak? Really? I understand Dak had like almost an MVP campaign, but that's only because he's a quarterback. Based on the body of work, yeah, Dak had a really good year last year, but like that was his best season of his NFL career. So Is Dak better than Stroud going into next year? I'll take Stroud. I'll take Stafford. I'll take Herbert. Like, on average, Dak is like the 12th or 10th best quarterback in the league. Last year, he was like the 6th or 5th, right? So, like, you kind of got to average it out. That's just me. Jalen Hurts is way too high. Players love Jalen Hurts. I like Jalen Hurts. I just didn't think he played that well last year. I have my legitimate concerns about Jalen Hurts. Like, I think you could argue he wasn't even a top 12 quarterback last year. And what is he on this list? Like 5th, 4th, 3rd? So, him being 3 spots in range of Josh Allen is like insanity. Like, absolutely outrageous. He's nowhere close to Josh Allen. Like, it's not even a conversation. It's not even, nobody on earth would take Jalen Hurts over Josh Allen. Nobody. Except for the most biased Eagles fans imaginable. Like, nobody. Okay? Like, Josh Allen can do everything Jalen Hurts can do, except he's way better at all the other little things. He's a way better passer. It's not even conversation. I'm worried about Hurts as a passer. I really am. I think teams really exposed him last year. Blitzing him, funneling him outside the pocket, right? Making him actually make reads thoroughly through the pocket. I'm a little concerned about Hurts. I'm not going to lie. At number 14, George Kittle. I love George Kittle. The People's tight end, phenomenal player. I think he's too high. He's top 25 player in the NFL. Based on the regular season, I mean, he was amazing last year. Like, he was the best tight end in football in the regular season last year. That's totally cool. But the playoffs just were underwhelming. I think it had something to do with the injury, but I just expected more from him in the playoffs, man. I think he's a great player, though. I'd have him in the top 25. I just don't think he's 14th. At number 13, CeeDee Lamb, I think, is like a dead-on ranking at number 13. I don't think he's quite top 10 because I think Jefferson and Tyreek are better receivers, but he's like right there. He's like 11, 12, 13, 14, in that range. At number 12, Josh Allen being outside the top 10 is one of the dumbest rankings I've ever seen in my life. Josh Allen is easily a top 5 player in the NFL. Like, easily. Like, what does he not do? He set the record with 15 rushing touchdowns for a quarterback last year. He led the NFL in total yards. He led the NFL in total touchdowns. He led the NFL in PFF grade, quarterback position last year. He led the NFL in big-time throws. What does the guy not do? He basically carried his team. He willed his team to the playoffs last year. So to me, like, Josh Allen is at least top 5. At least. At least. And that's if you're being fair to, like, the positional value. If you throw positional value into it, he's probably number 2. If you remove positional value, he's probably like 5th. Right? 11, Fred Warner. There's no way Fred Warner is better than Josh Allen. There's no way. There's no way. Fred Warner's not better than Roquan Smith, bro. I don't think. I think Fred Warner has become a little bit overrated. Just a little bit. I love Fred Warner. He's a great player. He's great in coverage. I think in terms of his physicality, his overall tackling, just not the same last year. I felt like he was a little bit lower last year. That's just me. Now, the top 10, we don't have it in order. I couldn't find the graphic that it's in order, but so I'll tell you what the order was. It was at number 1, they had Tyreek Hill, which was the controversy. And I made a video about Tyreek Hill versus Patrick Mahomes because everybody expected Mahomes to be number 1, but he wasn't. And that was kind of weird. Now, what I understand is that I feel like it was because the players probably didn't vote after the Super Bowl, but they voted during the playoffs at some point probably, or like right after the regular season. So that would make sense as to why Mahomes was in number 1, because he wasn't the best quarterback in the regular season. You know, you could debate that he probably wasn't even in the top 3. Definitely not statistically. Like, he was barely top 10 in a number of categories in statistics. So, yeah, he's Patrick Mahomes, though, right? Like, he was the reigning MVP going into the year. He was Super Bowl MVP. He was Super Bowl champion. He was coming off one of the best quarterback seasons of all time. And then he backed it up this year with another ring, right? Back to back. So if it was taken after the playoffs, I think it's crazy not to have Mahomes first. But at the same time, like, Tyreek Hill had one of the best receiver seasons, in my opinion, of all time that I've ever seen. Like, It's up there with any of AB's seasons. It's up there with any of Megatron's seasons. Like, he missed like a game or two, if I'm not mistaken. If he hadn't have missed a game or two, I feel like he has like 1,900 yards and all that. But like, he was still, despite missing a game or two, he was still first in yards. He was still tied for first in touchdown with Mike Evans, and he was second in receptions under CeeDee Lamb. He had the most yards per route run in football, right? He was up there in first downs. He was up there in every statistical category. He's the most dangerous weapon in football. So to me, like, him being in the top 3 is like absolutely locked and loaded. He is a top 3 player. Now, number 1 is a little crazy just because you've got Mahomes at number 1 probably, right? But like, I think there's a debate for 2. If you're not going to throw positional value as the biggest importance on the list, then it's probably not Josh Allen, right? So you probably look at like McCaffrey or Tyreek Hill, in my opinion, because McCaffrey was Offensive Player of the Year over Tyreek Hill, and McCaffrey had, 23 touchdowns, a ton of receptions, like led the NFL in rushing, led the NFL in total yards, led the NFL in total touchdowns, right? So he really ramped it up last year, and he was like the best player on the best offense. So McCaffrey is definitely top 3. Like, so for me in my top 100, in one way, shape, or form, you're going to see Mahomes in there. You're going to see Tyreek. You're going to see McCaffrey in my top 3 or 4. You're going to see Josh Allen, and you'll probably see the best defensive player, whether that be Myles Garrett, TJ Watt. I respect TJ Watt and Myles Garrett being on there, right? Myles Garrett, number 5 on the list. TJ, I think, was like 8. Number 2 was Lamar, who was the MVP of football. I think Lamar is too high. Like I just said, I'd probably have Lamar in my top 10, especially if you consider last year. But based on like overall players in the NFL entering 2024, he's probably not my top 5. Now, again, MVP season, dynamic player, carries the Ravens in a lot of ways, makes his protection better, makes his receivers better, makes his run game better, leads the team. Trent Williams was very high on the list. I almost feel like he had a little bit of he still had a great year. He's still the best tackle in the league. But I feel like he was ranked a little too high this year. That's just me. I think he was like 4th. No, he was 5th. No, 6th. 6th. Because it was number 1 was Mahomes. Number 1 was not Mahomes. Number 1 was Hill. Number 2 was Lamar. Number 3 was McCaffrey. Number 4 was Mahomes. Number 5 was Garrett. Number 6, I think, was Trent. Number 7 was... 6 was Chris Jones. 7 was Trent. 8 was TJ. 9 was Kelsey, and 10 was Crosby. Yeah, that was the top 10 order. I think Kelsey's too high. I don't think he's top 10 anymore, especially considering his age, but he's amazing. He's top 20 for sure. Crosby, I love that he's there. I think he's like right there. He's like, you could rather have him at 10 or like 12. He's in that sort of range for me. Lamar, again, I believe he's on the list. He's just too high. Chris Jones, I think, is too high. I actually felt like he had a bad season against the run last year. He was not a good run defender last year for a majority of last season. It's just that with Chris Jones in the biggest games, he plays the best. And that's why he's probably in the top 10. Like, but if he's in the top 10, he's like 9 or 10. That's just me. That's just me. Right? Garrett, TJ, I would have on the list. Absolutely. So yeah, I think it's an interesting list. I think there's a lot wrong with it, but it's also a lot good with it. And it was highly controversial, obviously. So you guys let me know in the comment section below what you thought, what you agreed with me with, what you disagreed with me with. And yeah, another reaction here on the Bottom Line View. I'll be coming out with my top 100 probably closer to the season start because I want to come out with more of my rankings at linebacker and defensive line and things like that so that I can kind of showcase all my position rankings before I give my top 100 so that it kind of correlates and makes sense. So I will give you a top 100, but it will be a little bit closer to 2024. Thank you guys for watching. It's Mitch, excited for the next season ahead and seeing who the best players in the league will be. Peace.